In 1849, Dostoevsky was led in front of a firing squad in Siberia after being arrested for anti-government organizing. He had already published multiple books at this point in his life. His first book, Poor Folk, was lauded as an excellent example of Russian literature by multiple critics. His second book, The Double, did not perform well, but he continued to write. After taking a large monetary blow from this aforementioned failure, in 1846, he found solace in joining the utopian socialist Beketov Circle, a group of individuals invested in Russian social reform. He would not stay here long, though, as he eventually grew distant from their ideas. The loneliness that plagued him during his poorer months returned, and he became sicker and sicker over the next year. Eventually, he found a new group of reformists, called the Petrashevsky Circle. Dostoevsky's stay at the club was revitalizing for him, in no small part because the circle had a library. In the beginning, Dostoevsky only occasionally talked with the men about the politics they sought to change, but he would read at the library almost every weekend. The group was calm and peaceful, and the noblemen in it were sensible and reserved. That is, except for one, Nikolai Speshnev, who joined the circle in 1848 and set about creating a secret revolutionary society from amongst its members. Dostoevsky himself became a member of this society, and he was aware of its rather revolutionary aims. He participated in its illegal activities, although there is evidence that his confidence in the possibility of success was rather low. As this small revolution began to bubble up through the cracks of the society, the tragedy happened. They were reported to an agent of the Minister of Internal Affairs, Ivan Petrovich Liprandi, the same man who would later help Leo Tolstoy write War and Peace by writing a detailed account of Napoleon's actions in Russia. Liprandi, no stranger to revolutionaries after his involvement with the Decembrist Revolution in 1825, followed the group for a year. At the end of his investigation, on April 20th, 1849, he gave the ministry the names of 4 men to arrest. Together, the members of the Revolutionary Circle were arrested and sentenced to death by firing squad. They are sent to a prison for 4 months before being transported back to St. Petersburg, where their death sentence awaited. The group was separated into lines of 3, Dostoevsky being in the second group. The first group, in plain view of the others, was tied up. The guns were loaded. The guns were raised, and then lowered. At the last minute, a carriage delivered a letter from Tsar Nicholas I, the same man who had condemned the men to death, to reduce the sentence to 4 years at a labor prison in Siberia. It was an act. The sentence had actually been precluded many days before, but the Tsar wanted to send a message, and so he did. If you ask most scholars what makes Dostoevsky Dostoevsky, they would probably mention this event, along with the 4 years he spent in the Siberian prison, as the primary inciting incidents of Dostoevsky's style. And they would be right to do so. His novel, The Idiot, relates the feelings and transformations he experienced due to this horrible fear of death. Both Crime and Punishment and the brothers Karamazov are starkly more enigmatic and incredible than his earlier works before his mock execution. Those 3, along with his 1871 novel Demons, both incorporate a much more gothic, philosophical, and religious style than his pre-prison publication. But I have always had a slightly different perspective on what made Dostoevsky Dostoevsky. When I ask myself that question, I don't think that the entire answer is his traumatic experience in St. Petersburg or Siberia. To me, what makes Dostoevsky himself is his close relationship with his own psychology. All of these manic and crazy characters are certainly wild, but they are also incredibly human. People, in real life, are not solid or sure of themselves. They change their minds, they stutter and flit between ideas, sometimes changing direction mid-sentence, mid-word. In 1888, Friedrich Nietzsche famously said, "Dostoevsky, the only psychologist from whom I've anything to learn." And when I think of that, when I isolate his style to the pure attention to psychology, I think of one influence. You see, Around the time Dostoevsky joined the Petrushevsky circle, a fierce wave of a kind of utilitarian rationalism was spreading across Russia. This took the form of anti-romanticism and started to separate the works of authors like Alexander Pushkin from other contemporaries. Ideas were accepted or rejected based on their strict adherence to facts. If an idea was deemed useless or unwieldy, it was discarded. Stylized literature often fell in this category. Among these rationalists was a man named Nikolai Gogol. In his short story The Overcoat, a book that Dostoevsky mentions repeatedly in his first novel Poor Folk, Gogol says this: "It's really impossible to get inside a man's soul and learn all he thinks." And this is what I believe makes Dostoevsky Dostoevsky. Joseph Frank, a leading 21st century Dostoevsky scholar and novelist, once stated, "A confluence of Pushkin and Gogol propelled Dostoevsky away from Romanticism." Of course, Dostoevsky respected both the romantic Pushkin and the callous but psychological Gogol, but it's clear to me that he saw this quote 3 whole years before his traumatic imprisonment in Siberia, embedded in one of the most read stories of the time in Russia, and that set his mind afire. In a sense, he wanted both, and he was determined to show that one could be aware of the rationalist reality of the world, but also continuously wrestle with the very human romantic ideas that we all cling to. So, does Dostoevsky reach inside a man's soul? Does he teach us all that a man thinks? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. Just 1 year before his arrest and exile, Dostoevsky published his last pre-trial short story, White Nights. The story is incredibly short and lasts only 4 nights and the following morning, a common French form of the time, and it starts where Dostoevsky's early career ended, St. Petersburg. The name of the novel itself is an allusion to the fact that many nights in St. Petersburg glow with a sun that never truly sets, due to the high latitude of the city. But it also means something else. On one of these glowing nights, a particularly depressed and lonely man walks along the streets of the city. His friends have left him, and this has made him perpetually uncomfortable around new people. In their place, the empty streets of the night are a comfort, and he imagines the buildings talking to him as he walks along. This night, however, he sees a beautiful woman crying as she leans over a railing near a bridge. Strange, I thought. She must be deeply absorbed in something, and all at once I stopped as though petrified. I heard a muffled sob. Yes, I was not mistaken. The girl was crying, and a minute later I heard sob after sob. Good heavens, my heart sank. And timid as I was with women, yet this was such a moment. I turned, took a step towards her, and should certainly have pronounced the word, Madame, if I had not known that the exclamation has been uttered 1,000 times in every Russian society novel. It was only that reflection stopped me. But while I was seeking for a word, the girl came to herself, looked round, started, cast down her eyes, and slipped by me along the embankment. He quickly decides to leave her alone, his old uncomfortable nervousness returning. But then he witnesses a man chase her over a bridge. Riled into excitement, he saves her from the man and escorts her away, back to where she lives. She holds his arm the whole way, and this calms him a little. She is beautiful, and he admits to her that he is a shy man, and that he doesn't feel confident around other people. She reassures him that she likes his shyness. She admits to being lonely too. He learns that her name is Nastenka, a diminutive form of the Russian name, Anastasia. As the night ends, the man asks her if he can see her again. The girl agrees, but has one request. It's just because I do know you that I ask you to come tomorrow, said the girl, laughing. I know you perfectly, but mind you will come on the condition, in the first place, only be good, do what I ask, you see. I speak frankly. You won't fall in love with me. That's impossible, I assure you. I am ready for friendship, here's my hand, but you mustn't fall in love with me. I beg you. He, of course, does return, and his view of the night and his home is much changed. With the prospect of talking avidly and clearly to another person, his perspective changes too. With this comes an overflowing of emotion, an overflow that Nastenka kindly takes in. The man admits he has always been alone. He sees himself as something less than human, as something apart and different. He talks about being only a dreamer, a strange, maladroit psyche, not a living human being. But he also admits that something in this last 2 nights has changed. With her attention, he feels accepted and alive. His language becomes beautiful and absurd as he continues to speak, gushing with metaphor and nuance. He switches from first person to third person. He becomes like a writer. Nastenka, with a kindness that he is not used to, tells him this. Listen, you describe it all splendidly, but couldn't you perhaps describe it a little less splendidly? You talk as though we were reading it out of a book. Nastenka, I answered, in a stern and dignified voice, hardly able to keep from laughing. Dear Nastenka, I know I describe splendidly, but excuse me, I don't know how else to do it. At this moment, dear Nastenka, at this moment, I am like the spirit of King Solomon when, after lying 1,000 years under 7 seals in his urn, those 7 seals were at last taken off. At the end of this night, feeling infinitely closer than they have ever felt before, Nastenka again agrees to be a friend to him, and in solidarity with his newfound openness, she tells him her story. Nastenka is also alone, but for a different reason. She lives with her blind and very strict grandmother, who keeps her physically pinned to her side for the entire day. The only freedom she has is when her mother falls asleep, and she can replace herself for a while with their maid without being noticed. They rent out a small room, and one night a new tenant arrives. It's a handsome young man. In keeping with the uniting and human influence of books, the man gives Nastenka a collection of Walter Scott novels to read. Grandmother agreed with gratitude, but kept asking if they were moral books, for if the books were immoral, it would be out of the question. One would learn evil from them. And what should I learn, grandmother? What is there written in them? Ah, she said, what's described in them is how young men seduce virtuous girls, how, on the excuse that they want to marry them, they carry them off from their parents' houses, how afterwards they leave these unhappy girls to their fate, and how they perish in the most pitiful way. I read a great many books, said grandmother, and it is all so well described that one sits up all night and reads them on the sly. So mind you don't read them, Nastenka, she said. What books has he sent? They are all Walter Scott's novels, grandmother. Walter Scott's novels? But stay, isn't there some trick about it? Look, hasn't he stuck a love letter among them? Again, we see Dostoevsky's cunning use of literary tradition and how he connects it to the, at the time, incorrect modern interpretations. Walter Scott is a vividly romantic writer and poet. The very same Pushkin that we talked about in the beginning is also mentioned among the man's books. The man even takes her to see a play, The Barber of Seville. But it is not to last, and just as the relationship grows to its strongest, the man admits he needs to leave. In a flurry of panic, Nastenka packs all of her things the night before and stands in front of his room for an hour, not gaining the courage to go in and ask her question. Eventually, he realizes she is outside his door and sits her down on his bed. Listen, my dear good Nastenka, listen. I swear to you that if I am ever in a position to marry, you shall make my happiness. I assure you that now you are the only one who could make me happy. Listen, I am going to Moscow, and shall be there just a year. I hope to establish my position. When I come back, if you still love me, I swear that we will be happy. Now it is impossible. I am not able. I have not the right to promise anything. Well, I repeat, if it is not within a year, it will certainly be some time. That is, of course, if you do not prefer anyone else, for I cannot and dare not bind you by any sort of promise. It's rather like a novel, isn't it? Well, we all know what the rationalists of Russia would say about that. At the end of this night, we learn that the year has passed. The man has returned to St. Petersburg. This is something she is sure of, but he has not sent her any letter or word. They depart, the man thinking furiously about how he can help her. Today was a gloomy, rainy day without a glimmer of sunlight, like the old age before me. I am oppressed by such strange thoughts, such gloomy sensations. Questions still so obscure to me are crowding into my brain, and I seem to have neither power nor will to settle them. It's not for me to settle all this. On the third night, the narrator has promised to send her letter to the man, asking for his whereabouts and telling him to meet them at her house at 11 that night. But he is plagued by sadness. He fears and knows that he is starting to fall in love with Nastenka. He wrestles with these feelings and is tugged back and forth by his teeming thoughts. But my God, how could I have thought it? How could I have been so blind when everything had been taken by another already, when nothing was mine? When, in fact, her very tenderness to me, her anxiety, her love, yes, love for me, was nothing else but joy at the thought of seeing another man so soon, desire to include me too in her happiness? My Nastenka was so downcast, so dismayed that I think she realized at last that I loved her, and was sorry for my poor love. So when we are unhappy, we feel the unhappiness of others more. Feeling is not destroyed, but concentrated. The pair wait for the letter, but nothing comes. Nastenka becomes more frantic, and turns to her new friend for support, a support that the narrator readily gives. As they sit together and talk about possible reasons the man has not written, Nastenka turns to the narrator and says, "Do you know why I'm so glad?" she said. "So glad to look at you. Why, I like you so much today." "Well?" I asked, and my heart began throbbing. "I like you because you have not fallen in love with me. You know that some men in your place would have been pestering and worrying me, would have been sighing and miserable, while you are so nice." Then she wrung my hand so hard that I almost cried out. She laughed. "Goodness, what a friend you are," she began gravely a minute later. "God sent you to me. What would have happened to me if you had not been with me now? How disinterested you are, how truly you care for me. When I am married, we will be great friends, more than brother and sister. I shall care, almost as I do for him." As they talk, and their emotions slide up and down together, the clock strikes 11. The man still has not come. The narrator and the girl sit for a while, and again he starts to come up with excuses. The dialogue is full of unstated emotion. Cracks form and widen between the lines. Worries and fears start to show through. "Here, you, for instance, are not like other people. I really don't know how to tell you what I feel, but it seems to me that you, for instance, at the present moment, it seems to me that you are sacrificing something for me," she added timidly, with a fleeting glance at me. "Forgive me for saying so. I am a simple girl, you know. I have seen very little of life, and I really sometimes don't know how to say things," she added in a voice that quavered with some hidden feeling, while she tried to smile. "But I only wanted to tell you that I am grateful, that I feel it all too. Oh, may God give you happiness for it. What you told me about your dreamer is quite untrue now, that is. I mean, it's not true of you. You are recovering. You are quite a different man from what you described. If you ever fall in love with someone, God give you happiness with her. I won't wish anything for her, for she will be happy with you. I know, I am a woman myself, so you must believe me when I tell you so." And then, when we parted, she gave me her hand and said, looking at me candidly, "We shall always be together, shan't we?" She was already there. I noticed her a good way off. She was standing as she had been that first time, with her elbows on the railing, and she did not hear me coming up to her. "Nastenka!" I called to her, suppressing my agitation with an effort. "Well?" she said. "Well, make haste!" I looked at her in perplexity. "Well, where's the letter? Have you brought the letter?" she repeated, clutching at the railing. "No, there is no letter," I said at last. "Hasn't he been to you yet?" She turned fearfully pale, and looked at me for a long time without moving. I had shattered her last hope. "Well, God be with him," she said at last in a breaking voice. "God be with him if he leaves me like that." She dropped her eyes, then tried to look at me and could not. For several minutes, she was struggling with her emotion. All at once she turned away, leaning her elbows against the railing, and burst into tears. And here we are, back at the beginning. Nastenka's crying is replaced with frustration. She sobs as she expresses her anger at her lover's callousness. "Oh, how inhumanly cruel it is," she began again. "And not a line, not a line! He might at least have written that he does not want me, that he rejects me, but not a line for 3 days. How easy it is for him to wound, to insult a poor, defenseless girl whose only fault is that she loves him." Just like the man's frustrations, Nastenka's outbursts are an echo of the anti-romanticists. These false hopes, these ideas of perfect love and romance, can only inevitably disappoint us. Why do we hold on to such ideas? The narrator tries to comfort her once again, saying maybe another letter will help, knowing his words mean nothing. Nastenka, angered for the final time, refuses to write again, saying she no longer loves the lodger. She has forgotten him, left him behind. "Listen," she said, taking my hand. "Tell me, you wouldn't have behaved like this, would you? You would not have abandoned a girl who had come to you of herself. You would not have thrown into her face a shameless taunt at her weak, foolish heart. You would have taken care of her. You would have realized that she was alone, that she did not know how to look after herself, that she could not guard herself from loving you, that it was not her fault, that she had done nothing. Oh dear, oh dear." "Nastenka," I cried at last, unable to control my emotion. "Nastenka, you torture me. You wound my heart. You are killing me, Nastenka. I cannot be silent. I must speak at last, give you utterance to what is surging in my heart. It's impossible. But I love you, Nastenka. There it is. Now everything is told." The narrator starts to cry too, as his emotions pour out. He tells the confused girl all, his romantic ideas finally taking over. She sits for a while, taking it all in, but tells the man to continue. And after it all, a glimmer returns to her heart. And after both of them have calmed down, a decision is made. I love him. But I shall get over it. I must get over it. I cannot fail to get over it. I'm getting over it, I feel that. Who knows? Perhaps it will all end today. For I hate him, for he has been laughing at me, while you have been weeping here with me. For you have not repulsed me as he has, for you love me while he has never loved me. For in fact, I love you myself. Yes, I love you. I love you as you love me. I have told you so before, you heard it yourself. I love you because you are better than he is, because you are nobler than he is, because he... And silence. How strange we all are. No other author has ever written characters that are so incredibly, impossibly human. It truly is already like reading someone's soul, 32 years before the brothers Karamazov. The two walk away from the railing together, talking animatedly about their newfound affection. From this arise beautiful plans, about where to live, about taking care of her blind grandmother, about the servants they will have, about how hard they will work for each other. It's natural, I think, to look at inconstancy with derision. In a contemporary romance novel, dedication and strict adherence to complete and unfaltering love is venerated and adored. It's something we all want to happen. But reality is not like that, is it? Humans are not like that. This is what the rationalists deride so much. They want to defeat these ideas and cast them aside. Dostoevsky, though, wants both. To him, there is an immense and beautiful truth in between and outside of both of these ideas. Are humans fickle? Yes, of course. But does that mean impossible ideas are useless? Does that mean that these intense, powerful emotions are just leaves in the wind, fleeting things that have no effect or purpose? Well, let's finish the story. It's like this. She began in a weak and quavering voice, in which, however, there was a note that pierced my heart with a sweet pang. Don't think that I am so light and inconstant. Don't think that I can forget and change so quickly. I have loved him for a whole year, and I swear by God that I have never, even in thought, been unfaithful to him. He has despised me. He has been laughing at me. God forgive him. But he has insulted me and wounded my heart. I do not love him, for I can only love what is magnanimous, what understands me, what is generous, for I am like that myself, and he is not worthy of me. Well, that's enough of him. He has done better than if he had deceived my expectations later, and shown me later what he was. Well, it's over. But who knows, my dear friend? She went on, pressing my hand. Who knows? Perhaps my whole love was a mistaken feeling, a delusion. Perhaps I began in mischief, in nonsense, because I was kept so strictly by grandmother. Perhaps I ought to love another man, not him, a different man, who would have pity on me and But don't let us say any more about that, Nastenka broke off, breathless with emotion. I only wanted to tell you that if, although I love him, did love him, if in spite of this you still say, if you feel that your love is so great that it may at last drive my heart from my old feeling, if you will have pity on me, if you do not want to leave me alone to my fate, without hope, without consolation, if you are ready to love me always as you do now, I swear to you that my love will be at last worthy of your love. Will you take my hand? Their conversations blossom again, and love truly seems like an incredible thing. The narrator's life, which before then had seemed so pointless, so lonely, is made exciting and wonderful. He can't wait to see Nastenka again after this night. His mind is set afire. His night is white. Come along. Look at the sky, Nastenka. Look! Tomorrow will be a lovely day. What a blue sky, what a moon. Look, that yellow cloud is covering it now. Look, look! No, it has passed by. Look, look. But Nastenka did not look at the cloud. She stood mute, as though turned to stone. A minute later she huddled timidly close up to me. Her hand trembled in my hand. I looked at her. She pressed still more closely to me. At that moment, a young man passed by us. He suddenly stopped, looked at us intently, and then again took a few steps on. My heart began throbbing. Nastenka! Nastenka, it's you! I heard a voice behind us, and at the same moment the young man took several steps towards us. My God, how she cried out, how she started, how she tore herself out of my arms and rushed to meet him. I stood and looked at them, utterly crushed. But she had hardly given him her hand, had hardly flung herself into his arms, when she turned to me again, was beside me again in a flash, and before I knew where I was, she threw both arms around my neck and gave me a warm, tender kiss. Then, without saying a word to me, she rushed back to him again, took his hand, and drew him after her. I stood a long time, looking after them. At last the two vanished from my sight. The pendulum swings back again, and she is taken away from him, just like he protected her from the unknown man at the beginning of the story. The final white night ends. If you stopped reading at this point, you might be convinced that the rationalists have won. Those ideas of love and true affection really do mean nothing. A white knight? Nonsense. They are simply a delusion of what we want to exist, but is not there. But this story does not end there. We rejoin our narrator one last time, in the morning following this sad scene. Matrona, his maid, delivers him a letter, one that just arrived this morning. Oh, forgive me, forgive me. I beg you on my knees to forgive me. I deceived you and myself. It was a dream, a mirage. My heart aches for you today. Forgive me, forgive me. Don't blame me, for I have not changed to you in the least. I told you that I would love you. I love you now. I more than love you, oh my God. If only I could love you both at once. Oh, if only you were he. God knows what I would do for you now. I know that you are sad and dreary. I have wounded you. But you know when one loves a wrong is soon forgotten. And you love me. We shall meet. You will come to see us. You will not leave us. You will be forever a friend, a brother to me. And when you see me, you will give me your hand, yes? You will give it to me. You have forgiven me, haven't you? You love me as before. Oh, love me. Do not forsake me, because I love you so at this moment, because I am worthy of your love, because I will deserve it, my dear. Next week I am to be married to him. He has come back in love. He has never forgotten me. You will not be angry at my writing about him, but I want to come and see you with him. You will like him, won't you? Forgive me. Remember and love, your Nastenka. After he reads this, a strange thing happens. The loneliness closes a little around him, but only a little. His house seems to darken and grow old. He envisions him, his maid, even the neighbor's house 15 years in the future, decrepit and unchanged. But just as he falls a little deeper into the despair he felt at the beginning, the memory of those 4 nights returns. But to imagine that I should bear you a grudge, Nastenka, that I should cast a dark cloud over your serene, untroubled happiness, that by my bitter reproaches I should cause distress to your heart, should poison it with secret remorse, and should force it to throb with anguish at the moment of bliss, that I should crush a single one of those tender blossoms, which you have twined in your dark tresses when you go with him to the altar. Oh, never, never. May your sky be clear, may your sweet smile be bright and untroubled, and may you be blessed for that moment of blissful happiness which you gave to another, lonely and grateful heart. My God, a whole moment of happiness. Is that too little for the whole of a man's life? To Dostoevsky, romanticism might be a fabled dream. Its promises and hopes may never come true, and the rational reality might come crashing down on us again. But our psychology is an incredibly powerful thing. To be human means to be able to change the world around you, to see things in new ways, including yourself. To be able to dream. And one of the greatest tools we have to change our lives for the better is that small grasp of hope that refuses to be dredged up by our rational side. One day, when our minds start to collapse in on themselves, to believe that it really is all hopeless, that the reality of our lives is nothing but a lonesome walk down a dark street, those hopes, the memories of those white nights, might just be enough to last us a lifetime.